Good afternoon. I see a bunch of you are starting to log on. We're going to get started in just a sec. So I just wanted to let you know there is really somebody here once I go into the PowerPoints and stuff. So with that, my name is Liz Higgins. I'm an Extension Associate with the Cornell Cooperative Extension Eastern New York Commercial Hort Team. And welcome back to the webinar version of a program we're putting on this winter on looking at orchard investments. So the next few webinars are really going to be covering just specific concepts that we're hoping that people who attend the meetings this winter, to give them some of the background that you would need in order to sort of apply some of the financial assessment tools by yourself. So with that, I will start today's exciting webinar and share. And great. I do have the chat available. So if you have questions, I should be able to see them in the chat. Otherwise, at the end, I can unmute you if you have specific questions. So today we're going to talk about farm strategy and also farm value chain. And so the intent of this webinar is really to think about, before you start making investments, it's really important to have sort of an overall, make those investments as part of an overall farm business plan and a farm strategic plan so that they're in line with the goals that you have sort of set for yourself as a business. I just also want to give credit to the project team. In addition to myself, I'm working with Craig Kalki with the Lake Ontario Fruit Team, Dan Donahue and Mike Bastow with the Eastern New York Commercial Hort Team, and they're all tree fruit production specialists that work for Cornell Cooperative Extension. And this grant was funded, this is part of a grant that was funded by the Northeast Risk Management Education. So it's really important. Yesterday, I discussed the importance of monitoring your farm's financial statements as a way to determine if there are trends in your business financially that you should consider as you make investment decisions, or that might be informing your decision that you need to make an investment decision. So today, I want to emphasize the importance of strategic planning and business planning in your investment decisions. I'm first going to start by covering farm and business strategy and how those strategies would drive the choices that you would make about how you invest in your business. And then the other concept I just want to touch on is the concept of a farm business value chain. And this is to help you start thinking about your farm as a set of connected links, each of which contribute to the overall productivity and profitability of the business. So first I want to start with a couple of concepts, farm strategy versus a business strategy. Your farm strategy is really the big picture of your business, and it determines what markets you compete in, wholesale versus retail, for example, or do you invest in hard cider? It makes decisions about large-scale acquisitions and divestments. It thinks about succession and exit strategies. It's generally longer-term thinking. Your business strategy, on the other hand, is how you'll, within the enterprises that you've decided, how will you compete and how will you carry out this overall farm strategy? It's to a certain extent the implementation of that farm strategy. So how do you price products? How do you source materials? How do you market yourself to customers? How do you make yourself more efficient and effective within an enterprise would be a business strategy. So it's shorter term in that you should be adjusting your business strategy more frequently to take advantages of opportunities or to solve problems, but that should always be in the context of your overall sort of overarching farm strategy. So the farm strategy, I have like a little umbrella there because the farm strategy is sort of the umbrella under which all your various business strategy and enterprise strategies operate. And these two levels of strategic thinking should definitely be working together. Both your large investments and daily management decisions should really correspond to what your strategy is. So, farming efficiently, being a good grower, an excellent day-to-day manager is really, really important. And in many cases, farms that have effective overall operations, have been successful and have achieved success. But what worked in the past won't always work in the future. So for example, many of you are tree fruit growers. In tree fruit processing facilities in the U.S., the number of processing facilities has declined. And there's more competition internationally for low value products like juice. And for most of you, this is not new information. But as a result, many tree fruit producers, and probably many of you, have shifted over to fresh market fruit. And that's required new capital investments in trees, planting systems, new marketing and distribution systems. Years ago, I worked with the last operating dairy farm in a county in North Louisiana that had been a dairy county, about 20 years before that. And he was really highly efficient and he had low costs of productions. By every metric, he was an excellent dairy producer. But he couldn't get his milk shipped affordably because he was the last man standing, in his part of the state. And he saw the writing on the wall, and he became the first agritourism farm in the region, and he was very successful. But he made this change, and he did this while he still had the energy and financial position to make that change. And then he also had a family that wanted to work in that business. So he had a strategy. He sort of saw what was likely to happen, and he was able to carry that out. Having a farm strategy is essentially monitoring your farm situation and external factors that will affect your farm business. Do you plan to have the next generation on the farm, for example? What stage of growth are you in? It's looking at those external factors. What are consumer trends? What are marketing trends? What are technologies? And it's looking at your performance, what your performance has been, and then what you need to do in order to maintain or improve your situation. But it's also important to note, we're going to talk a lot about like how important it is to have a strategy, that being strategic and being an early adopter isn't really enough. Although early adopters of a new technology or a new market, very strategic thinkers, they do have a competitive advantage if it's a profitable market that they are in, and that advantage is only going to last until more efficient and more effective operations enter that market or adopt that technology too. So if you're not a highly efficient or effective operation, long-term investments in an expensive new technology that have a long payback period might be really risky for you, especially if you're going to need those higher prices that an early adopter would get in order for that investment to be profitable. So I just want to say strategy really doesn't take the place of being an effective operator, but it's also a necessary condition sort of to have to have your business successful in the long run. So there's, several types of business strategies. There are 5 broad categories that are used by farms, and they're often interrelated. So there's some redundancy within them. You'll see that like a succession strategy, for example, can either lead to a growth or an exit strategy. But we have growth strategies, which is sort of growing the business, expanding the size of the business, or trying to grow profits. Stability strategies are maintenance strategies, maintaining the size of the business. Restructuring would be refocusing the business for improved performance, usually because you're sort of seeing that what you were doing isn't working anymore. Succession strategies would be strategies around transferring the business, and then exit strategies are a plan for ending and leaving the farm business. And each of those, most of them, have some sort of point at which you might be thinking about making investments or deciding whether or not an investment would be profitable. The choice of strategy also depends on the planning horizon that the farm has and the farm owner has. And that choice of strategy depends on the farm and the farm family's plans to continue after the original owner exits the business. So they're really they can be really tied to that life cycle of a farm operator. As the operator goes through the various phases, the type of strategy changes. People who are entering a business are almost always in a growth strategy. And these are really highly simplified charts because they sort of assume that everybody is like growth, stabilize, exit. And really some people are continuous growth. It's like growth, plateau, growth, plateau, growth, plateau. So how long you stay in the growth strategy will depend on your goals, the market, the environment you're in. If you're in a really stable market with like decent returns over time, you might be able to stay there for a while without sort of having, making a lot of investments because things are working. But eventually something is going to change and the farm is going to need a new strategy. And that could be because of markets. It could be because of owner goals. It could be because of technology changes. It could be because of succession planning. So your strategy, is also going to change during your life cycle. A strategy is not static. It's something that you should be continually revisiting, thinking about, and seeing if things still make sense what you're doing. So for growth strategies, there are about eight different options, and once again, often they're interrelated. But it's really important to think about, like, when with your business, what sort of growth strategies make sense. The first one is like either a business where you focus or specialize, and that's how you're going to grow your business, and attract more customers. And that's focuses on improving efficiency and reducing cost, but it's also producing at a specific quality level that that market wants. So you're going to be like the best grower of something, and cost effective, right quality. A lot of wholesale growers, especially people that focus on a few crops, or they do this. A lot of dairy farms are highly specialized. It can also be reaching a specific niche market, but the goal is that you pick one or two things and you become like really, really, really good at that. And that's your strategy. Another strategy can be that you're going to intensify or modernize your business. That's when you realize that you want to push more. You have a fixed asset base. You realize, maybe you're in an area where land is really expensive and you can't get more land. Or maybe your footprint for your processing facility is fixed and it'd be too expensive to build a whole new thing. And so you want to get more production out of that same relatively high cost asset base. And that then allows you to spread your fixed costs over greater output. Generally, that's really looking at your land base and saying, okay, instead of these like less productive trees, I'm going to put more productive trees through them. I'm going to mechanize, I'm going to do something that's mechanized, because then I can get more, more production off that same amount of space. Because your fixed costs often, like how effectively you can use your fixed costs are often really determine how profitable you are. Another option that a lot of farms, have traditionally done is expansion. So you've maximized what you can do on that asset base, so you expand. A lot of dairy farms, you get to a point and you realize, well, if I really want to utilize the assets that I have to their full amount, I'm going to expand my facility. I'm going to expand the number of trees I have. And that's usually what you do after other efficiencies have been exploited. You can't intensify anymore, so you grow in order to fully use that asset base that you have, and grow your profits. Another option is diversification, and that's sort of the opposite of specializing. That's adding new enterprises. And that does have the most potential when you are exploiting underutilized resources, skill, or management skills. Diversification actually can be. I remember back in the 80s, you had a lot of corporations, even like they became highly diversified. They kept like acquiring different businesses, and so I think you had like GE also had a TV station, and they diversified. But what you realize over time is the risk to diversification is that you need management and resources, used in very different ways. And so that can really stretch some businesses. And actually, instead of doing one thing really well, you do like multiple things badly. So you have to really, if you're thinking about diversification, you're most likely to be successful at it if you're investing in ways where you have, either some management knowledge or some resource that you already have available that you can utilize. And then as far as risk reduction, it only is a risk reduction strategy, diversification, if those investments aren't, in they're in the same fundamental economics. So if you wouldn't define growing two different varieties of apples, that are both fresh market apples. It might seem like diversification, like one's a club apple and one is like a standard apple, like an Empire or something. So it might seem like you're diversifying and you are hitting maybe slightly different markets with it. but you also, you're also subject to many of the same risks, the weather risks, the pest risks, and even some of the market, tastes. From a consumer's perspective, there might not be quite as much difference between those apples. So that's just something, it is something to consider as far as, it's not automatically risk reduction by diversifying. Replicating, that's sort of a twist on expansion, but that's when you have an enterprise and it's going really well. So you replicate, that existing operation on a different site. I know, I used to work in field crops more. A lot of soybean producers in the Midwest would also be soybean producers in Brazil or other countries. They just replicated what they did so that they could capture that seasonality and have, soybeans year round. I know a lot of vegetable growers have, in our area also have farms in the South. Once again, they're replicating a lot of what they do, but so that they can maintain that seasonality throughout the year. Another way to replicate is if you have a successful farm stand in one location and you have, you can replicate, you have a reputation already. You can replicate that in a different location also. The advantage to replication is you're already using the skills and knowledge and resources that you have, that sort of intellectual capital, but can also allow you to put, family members or managers, give people the opportunity to have more managerial, options than they might have if you just had one super large facility. So it does give you an opportunity for decentralized management, which could be attractive. Integration, vertical or, horizontal integration is when you decide that you're going to buy either a process, you're an apple producer and you're going to, pack and ship your own apples, or you're going to have a nursery to grow your own trees. One advantage to integration can be that it eliminates maybe some variability or risk of supply. That's one reason a lot of people become integrated growers, is they have trouble getting the inputs that they want at the quality that they want. And so by growing your own and controlling your own inputs, you then guarantee that supply that you have, for your primary business. Or it can be that you realize that you have an opportunity to capture some value, or you can guarantee yourself, you realize that, if people that get into like their own packing and shipping, you have more control over that marketing, that dollar too. So that can be, for some businesses that can totally make sense. For other businesses, that's not quite as, it doesn't make as much sense. You can run into some of the diversification issues, like it can stretch management, it can stretch resources. It may be that, it really should fit into your overall business in order, if you're deciding to integrate. Networking, especially for smaller farms or farms that have like limited capital of their own, networking can be very powerful. It's working with a group of farms, to look like, from a market perspective, a larger operation. A lot of our fruit and vegetable cooperatives, when you buy sun-kissed oranges, right? Like they all say sun-kissed orange, but there are a whole bunch of different orange growers. Or you buy grapes from California, raisins from California, like you don't know what raisin grower produced them. It's all of those, raisin growers, Dole, pineapple, or all of those things. A bunch of different growers work together, have a brand to reach a market. Those are really dependent on having good agreements and quality control. But in an area where, you don't have the ability to, or can't afford to expand that much, and there's other growers like you, that could be a less risky option and a good option in order to reach markets that you can't reach by yourself. And then the last one, is delay and wait and see, as far as a strategy. You want to grow, that there's something you want to do, but like the market is in too much churn right now, so you're not really sure what the best option is. In our area, a lot of fruit and vegetable producers were thinking about, do I get into CBD hemp production, right? Or do I, make hard cider, and you're not really sure what it's a big capital investment. and you're not really sure. So you have, you want to wait a little bit. Another time, another investment sort of delay is with new technologies. It could be that there's some technologies that are coming on the market that look like they have a lot of merit, but they may have different, sort of standards. There may not be some standardization. Then it may be that if you choose one type of, technology, that it could become obsolete really fast. And so you want to wait until there's a little bit more stability in that market, or the prices of that technology come down. Once again, even though this is a fruit example, in the dairy industry, it's been robotic milking, right? For a long time, that was a technology that was not affordable to a lot of producers, but it's gotten to a point now that for a lot of a lot of dairy farmers, that is, it's much more affordable. The costs have come down. There's more knowledge about how to utilize those sort of systems. So with things like a lot of robotics, a lot of automated systems, there's times where being the early adopter can be a little bit more risky, and you might want to wait to see like whether or not this is going to actually be the standard for the industry. So just to sort of summarize, just as far as thinking, the first three, like focusing your business, so really like being a focused producer of a specific product, intensifying your resource base or expansion, are all really looking at your current business and trying to optimize it, right? Like you're not looking to do anything different. You're just looking to do it more optimally and better. Whereas the other strategies, diversification, replication, integration, and networking, are all sort of adding new business ventures on. And generally, the thinking around those is you would consider them, especially if you are, either you've maxed out on your current business or you see that you might need to change. These can be ways of sort of shifting into different businesses, or providing like other sort of business opportunities for, for family members, or for your business. So for the delay strategy, would you recommend a soft opening approach as one way to move forward safely and test the market? I think that would certainly, it would depend on what the, infrastructure or the investment is. I mean, some infrastructure I think is costly enough that it's either like yes or no. You're not going to sort of like test the market on a new $3 million pack line, but you might want to like do a little bit more research on whether or not the price is likely to come down, or talk to some growers or see like whether or not they make sense. On the other hand, if it's like starting to do a little bit of value added or a little bit of different marketing, yeah, I mean, testing the market a little bit can be a way to do that. And actually market testing, depending on what you're doing, especially if it's like a value added, like agritourism certainly could be one, or it could be something like value added production could be something, if you haven't done that before, like actually getting into some level of processing. That's where you start to see things like value added producer grants, or planning grants, or something like that could be a way also of sort of making getting some more data before you decide to go forward. But deciding but making the commitment that you're going to decide at the end. I think the one challenge is with a lot of these things, even agritourism, you're still looking at an investment, and a significant investment, before you know whether or not this is actually a viable business. So like with agritourism, as an example, I would, if it was going to require hiring a whole bunch of new staff and making a lot of capital improvements to my farm, I would really want to do my due diligence first. Whereas if I have something there's some stuff ready to go, and I have some employees who are like, or family members who are ready to do this, and I can do it, testing it first to see if there's some legs, definitely could make some sense. So let me just move this over. So stability strategies, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on, but you saw that in the graph of sort of the farm business cycle, you know, a lot of farms are, operate sort of in a stability strategy, right? Like, and actually small businesses sort of writ large, a lot of them, growers have owners, small business owners sort of have a vision that they're going to get to a certain point, and once they're there, they want to stay there because that's what they want, so and if the operation is meeting your needs, your financials are good, these are, and you're clear on these goals and this is what you want, these are not necessarily bad strategies. It's just good to like know that this is what your goal is and this is what you're working towards or have worked towards, and you should be checking your financials, periodically to make sure it's still working. So, no change, your everything is fine. You have a full employment, you're going to grow to the point where everybody's fully employed, and it's maintained as long as everything is working. And that's great. The problem, with that strategy sometimes is that if the market shifts, if people aren't sort of on the ball thinking about what could happen within this strategy is still working, you can find that you're behind the 8 ball as far as, being able to sort of maintain in the long run the viability of your business. A lot of very small businesses grow until they get enough income, and that's their goal, and that's where they stay. And that's a great, for a sole proprietor that is gonna, that it's just their business, and then when it's, when they leave, that's that's it. That's a perfectly acceptable strategy. It's not a strategy that's really going to allow for sort of long-term viability over multi-generations or even 2 generations of that business. It's really like a one-person deal. Profit, like you get to a certain, once again, you basically, you use that business to get a certain level of profit, for use, but you're not really looking to grow. And then sometimes, after a period of rapid growth, the pause, like, you've made a big expansion and then you're just going to stay there for a while and take a breath. Like that is totally, that's totally normal. And, for a lot of people, that's, if you can stay there for a while, I mean, and sort of regroup and see how things are going, that's completely normal and fine. And then wait and see. Once again, like you're not really sure where to go. And this is sort of like with the growth strategy, even, you want to see what is going to happen, and once again you need to like have a point at which you're going to make a decision, right? You can't wait and see forever, and kick the can down the road. You have to say, like, when we get to this point we need to decide this, or when, or we're going to revisit this decision in a year. Like you have to have at least some sort of trigger that's going to make you like say, like, is this still working for us? Can we make a decision? Restructuring is generally used when the farm business is not performing like it should, and performance problems can range from inadequate income levels to a major threat of insolvency or bankruptcy, or you see like a major shift in the sort of in the the business landscape is happening right now for a lot of farms in our in New York. Labor costs are certainly, and labor availability is becoming an increasing problem. And so, it could be that the mix of enterprises that you have, won't work under a different sort of labor cost scenario. And so you see that coming and you're thinking about, refocusing some of what you're doing in order to make it so that you can be viable. I've talked to a lot of growers that are like, yeah, I've got some things that were more marginal, and now that when labor is at this price point, I can't do this, so I'm going to refocus my my energies towards these other things that I think are more viable under this type of labor, or I'm going to mechanize and reduce labor, but I see the handwriting on the wall. And so refocusing is not as drastic. It can be more gradual. It's used when you see that, you have adequate equity, you have enough money to make changes, and you're starting to make investments, but you see what you're doing right now is not going to be profitable in the long run. So growers that, I know there's been a lot of push for growers to switch apples, from less less profitable apples to higher value like club apples and honey crisps and stuff, and use a higher density systems because they see the handwriting on the wall that they need, that higher level of return in order to sort of continue to be a fresh market grower at the given their costs of production. Other growers have decided that given other, apple growers are like, the trees I have right now are fine because I'm able, like in the business that I'm in, I'm able to, I don't need to make that kind of investment because I'm making investments either in agritourism or local marketing or other things that will give me that value. Retrenchment is, when you are really starting to see that there are problems. Like, so this is a faster, retrenchment is a much faster process than refocusing. Refocusing is sort of like you see it's not going to work and you start to make changes. Retrenchment is like, holy moly, this isn't working. We're really not sound. We really have to do something. And that can involve things like selling off some of your assets. It can be, letting people go, restructuring the business, and rebuilding. And, that is something that, once again, we think about sort of the planning horizon of a farm. Retrenchment when you're 40 might be, a really reasonable thing to do if for a business that you're really otherwise excited about and you see opportunities in. Retrenchment when you're 70, might not be, you might not have enough time to do that, or you might, it just might not make sense. So the last option, and this usually doesn't involve a lot of investment, it really is more divestment, is if, you see that it's not profitable, it's not financially sound, a retrenchment strategy, you don't want to invest a lot more money because your planning horizon, just isn't there. Liquidating the business, is probably your best option before you lose all your equity, right? So while you still have assets that are saleable that, somebody else would want, that could be your best option. So those are the decisions that, are, that you need to think about it. You don't want to throw a lot of money at a business that, really it isn't going to make any difference at all. On the other hand, you want to make sure that you're making those investments sort of thinking through, like in the long run, what makes the most sense for the resources that you have. Succession strategies, I'm just going to sort of touch on a couple. There's two different things as far as farm succession. I mean, there's just like flat out exit and there's no succession. But, it's either farming together, and I have this in blue because this is one where, you are going to see growth, you need to see growth and investment. If you're really going to farm together as a family, you're bringing the next generation into the business, whether they're your own children or other new investors, and you're going to farm together, you have to any person that's starting a business is going to be in a growth mindset. But if you're definitely going to have two families or multiple generations all, sort of investing in the, part of this property, you have to, certainly have some level of growth, sort of mindset and strategies in order to keep the business viable over the long term. I mean, if you think about any company that's been around for more than 50 years, they're probably not producing today what they were producing 50 years ago. And if they had stopped making investments and they had stopped having strategic thinking around what they were going to do, they would be out, they would be still making, I don't know, like typewriters or whatever, like they would be making things that people are not buying. And in my area and in many areas, there used to be a lot of dairy farms, and a lot of our fruit and vegetable farms were formerly dairy farms, and those, and this generation now is a fruit and vegetable farmer. Their grandfather was a dairy farmer, so any business that's going to be multiple generations farming in that same business is going to need some level of growth level sort of investment in it. The other option would be a merger. And that's where, each person starts, they have their own business, the next generation and the older generation. And they, sort of, maybe they work together, maybe they share machinery and equipment, but they each have your own business. And then when the older party retires, that younger person would merge those two businesses. The older generation in that scenario might not be making a lot of investments in their business, because the next generation doesn't want those investments, right? Like they are, they're not going to get their money out of what they're doing. So, so it really, in any sort of succession strategy, the important thing is for all of the parties to be sort of communicating with each other about sort of what their long-term strategy is and what kind of investments under those scenarios make the most sense. And then exit strategies, the first three, holding pattern, using up your capital, and winding down the business and exiting. Most of those are trying to get as much value out of that, extract as much value out of that business before you go, right? Only the last option is really concerned about which investment options make the most sense. Creating a marketable operation. So if you're in the first three categories, your goal is really to get business, value out prior to selling the business, or selling the assets of the business. Really, you're not even really talking about a business sale at that point. But if your goal is to create a marketable option, you need to make sure you're not over investing. I've seen this one too. You want to put in infrastructure or make upgrades, that will give you a return on your investment when you sell. It's very easy sometimes, I think, to you have a lot of pride in this business, and you overinvest in infrastructure that, the next person coming in that buys it, they're not going to want. It's sort of like when you see people when they have a house and they really upgrade the kitchen to make the house more marketable, but they put in a kitchen that isn't the kitchen that, people buying the house even want to have, so you have to make sure that if you're making investments to create a marketable operation, you're choosing those things to invest in that make the business more valuable than what you've put in, not that you'll get your money out when you go to sell the business. I'm just going to touch quickly on business strategy. We're going to cover this a lot more sort of when we get into enterprise budgeting and thinking about sort of you're setting prices and stuff. But when for your business, once you've determined what you're doing, you need to know what kind of market you're in. So how easy is it to enter the market? How stable or mature is the market? Are the prices that we're seeing today likely to be stable into the future? How easy is it for customers to switch suppliers? Just having a sense of is this the kind of market that I can make investments in, and then I have some confidence about what the future 5 years down the road will look like? Or is this a market that I'm going to make an investment and I need to get a return faster because it's a less stable market? And then how am I positioned? Also, do I have if I'm making investments, do I have some level of market advantage that provides a barrier to entry? So my to other competitors, whether it's my reputation or location or infrastructure, because I'm going to make this investment based on also, once again, getting a return, can I keep other people out of it so that I can get those, those returns and keep, expand the market like I think I will. And part of that is understanding your costs, or, how you compare to your competitors. Will you be able, can you price, or are you going to be consistently underbid by, by other people? And then once again, this all sort of goes to what is the future for this market? How much risk is this, so in risk generally, when you're thinking about these things for investments, you have some investments that, you think, you're looking at something that will give you a lower level of return over a long period, but it's pretty safe. Or is this something that you really need to get a return quickly on because it's less safe, it's uncertain? I may need to extract my money from that quickly and put it into something else. Those are things that you'll be thinking about as far as the specific enterprises and the customers and stuff that you're looking at. The last concept that I want to cover today, as you're considering investments, is your what they call a business value chain, because different business strategies will result in investments in different parts of this what they call a value chain. And to define this, it's the full range of activities that are needed to create a product or service. It's the steps for bringing a product from conception to distribution. And, so in the value chain for a farm, you have research and development, and we often don't think of that as like an actual like unit in our, farm business, but that's, all of the effort that you put into business planning like this, testing new products, continuing education, going to conferences, going to trade shows, really keeping involved in the industry and learning so that you can sort of see where the markets are going. So investing in that part of your business, investing in production, the production of the crop. This is one that, most farms, they know they need to do this and they do this fairly well. So that's obviously critical to your farm business. Processing, and this is, so you can sell apples right out, you put them in a bin and you sell them right off the, basically out of the field. Some people added the extra step of processing, and that would be packing, processing, they have that also unit of business. The next one could be distribution. Do you have your own retail markets? Do you have a farm market? Do you do agritourism? Is this actually, another way that you move the product, sort of, your farm gets value out to customers. And then, the last two, HR, management, operations, this is the will help you optimize your other investments. It's how well you're running your business, your efficiency, and marketing and sales. How well do you reach customers? How good a job do you do sort of lining up new business and selling your product? And so as you consider investments in your orchard, you should be looking at this value chain sort of as a whole, not just sort of honing in on production, but really thinking about like all of the components of your business. The items in blue are your primary activities, and then those items in green are the support activities that make you more efficient or help you increase your competitive advantage. And thinking about where you're strong in and what part of your value chain investments would be most likely to improve your situation. You can be a farm that has everything that it needs to do well in production, but your HR and operations really need investments to help you optimize those prior investments. You really, how you do payroll is a mess. You're always spending tons of time, trying to track down invoices. You do a terrible job with billing. You're not getting paid in a timely fashion. Things like, so investments there might get you money faster and do better than, more investments in production systems. You definitely want to be looking at your whole farm value chain and finding where your weak links are, whether it's in operations or maybe it's in marketing, maybe it's in planning. Maybe you really realize that planning is the weak link, that you do a great job day to day, but you don't have a succession plan, you don't have an exit strategy, you don't really know where you should be, what you should be doing next. So definitely prioritizing your investments that address that weak link. So for example, you have risks like for business planning, you're so busy with day-to-day activities that you're not thinking about the future. So these are all, processing, you could be concerned, maybe you need to really upgrade your food safety standards, that's where or better cold storage. That's really where your weak link is. For HR management, are your wages and working conditions competitive? Are you really attracting the right people to your business? Are your managers well trained? Maybe training your managers would get you more returns than, a cold storage facility. Are you devoting enough resources to marketing and sales, and are you allocating those resources effectively? I guess with that, I'll turn it over if there's more questions. You could put in, as I said, I can answer, what's the word I'm looking for? I can unmute people, I think. Otherwise, if you have a question in the chat, I can answer that too. I do want to highlight that these webinars are really just to cover key concepts, but we're going to bring it all together in hands-on workshops in both Western New York and Eastern New York this winter. And that's where you'll have some scenarios and work with others to, to go through sort of, modeling, making these sort of investment decisions and using these tools so that when you go home, you can do this in your own farm. And hopefully this will be a lot more fun than sitting and watching me go through PowerPoint slides. I promise I will use very few to no PowerPoint slides in these workshops. So with that, if there's any other questions, otherwise tomorrow we're going to get into some more business planning kinds of topics, like I'm trying to remember what tomorrow is. It's all a blur at this point. I think tomorrow we're going to start to really do some more definitions of looking at things like allocating cost allocation and understanding things like fixed costs versus variable costs, and how you especially when you're looking at budgets, how you would allocate some of those things. So it should be very exciting. And I see, hold on, I see one hand up. Jarmila, yeah, I can, okay, you can talk. The recording, yes, all of these are.
Sorry. No, I didn't mean to raise my hand. I tried to just reach the Q&A. My question was, is this going to be recorded? Or I'm sure it is recorded, but is it going to be available a little later?
Yeah, so all of these webinars will be recorded, and I'm also will have handouts of the key concepts. And there's going to be a little bit of a time lag, but they will be, everybody who registers will get a link to all of the recordings and all of the sort of like the handout materials sort of that cover the concepts. So if you can't make one, or you'll definitely, by registering, you will definitely get them.
Yep, thank you.
Sure. And yeah, that's also to answer Ian's question. I'm going to put them all up on a website, and I will send the link out where all of the recordings will be as soon as I have a recording done and it's up on the website, so that you have the link. But it should be by the end of this week. I should have the first few up. Any other questions? So otherwise, we'll be back tomorrow at 12:30.